Welcome to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton. I'm here this week with my guest, Stephanie McCullough, who is the CEO and founder of Sofia Financial of Berwyn, Pennsylvania. Stephanie is passionate about helping women make wise financial decisions and does financial planning and public speaking in addition to investment management. Stephanie, what do you find these days is the status of women in investing in America?
Well, it's such an interesting question because I think most people don't realize that women control 51% of the personal wealth in the United States. And in the next 35 years, as you know, with the baby boomer intergenerational wealth transfer that's going to happen, women are said to inherit 70% of the wealth that will be transferred from one generation to the next. Mm-hmm. So it really is a big market, really, women and investing. And yet, there's a lot of research that shows women are not as confident as men when it comes to investing.
Why is that?
That's a good question. I feel like one of the reasons is that we're not allowed to talk about money, and women tend to learn by sharing their stories and hearing the stories of other people. So if we're not allowed to talk about money because it's not polite, that cuts off one way of learning about money. Another is that a lot of parents don't talk openly with their kids about money and finances. So we don't learn it that way. And we're not taught in schools.
Yeah, you have the traditional role issues as well, which are changing but never fast enough.
It's very true. I'm amazed. Even a lot of the younger women I meet, the millennials, tend to have that division of labor, which is very common and makes sense in couples where one spouse does one thing and another spouse does other things. But very often, even if the woman handles the finances and budget of the household, the investing is left up to the male partner.
Mm-hmm. Now, you tend to work mostly with baby boomer women, is that correct?
I do, yes.
And they have some unique challenges in addition to everything that we've already been talking about, because in some cases they are caregivers and they may be dealing with adult children and aging parents.
Right.
And probably, unless they're divorced or widowed, haven't really had to deal with the money issues because they're dealing with everything else.
I think that's very true. And, we hear how women on average make less than men in jobs in the best of times. Mm-hmm. But then if they take breaks to care for children, to care for older parents, that really also sets back our earnings. So if most people are saving for retirement from their earnings, women are earning less and working fewer years, but we also live longer.
So Social Security benefits may be lower?
Yes, for sure.
401k balances may be smaller?
Definitely.
And like you say, women do tend to live about 3 years longer than men.
Yep. It's true. And, I've heard plenty of stories where the male in the couple falls critically ill. The wife maybe stops working, if she was working, to care for him. They exhaust both the financial resources, but also the energy and the health of the woman caring for the man. When he passes away, she's left with not much.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of concerns do you find that women are coming to you with when you first meet with them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I noticed a pattern a couple of years ago that almost all the women I talk to use the same words. They say, I just want to be smart about it. They're really concerned about making decisions that will serve them in the long run. I think one of the biggest concerns is, will I be okay? Mm-hmm. Am I going to have enough money? Am I going to run out of money? Will I be able to retire? Will I become a burden on my family or my children? That's a huge concern for women.
Do you think that women may be more comfortable talking with you than with a man about these issues?
I hate to generalize too much, but I feel some women definitely feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I really do try to make it a judgment-free zone. Create a safe space to have the conversations. Money touches every part of our lives. Mm-hmm. So it's a very intimate topic. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to talk about money, we have to talk about your life and what you're trying to create, mm-hmm. your goals. So I think to create that judgment-free space, we've all made money mistakes. So acknowledging that and creating a space where it's okay to talk about those things, I think makes my clients feel more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. So women also, I think, tend to view money differently than men.
It's true. It's fascinating. There's a lot of research about that. And really, when I first read about the research, it was in the area of international development and trying to help very poor countries. And the folks who do that work found that if they directly help women, that aid then has ripple effects and increases the security of the families and the communities and then the whole countries, as opposed to when they tried to help men, the results weren't quite the same. So the research shows that, women's priorities around money really are about what the money will do for them as opposed to the money as an end result in itself. Trying to create better opportunities for their families, trying to, make sure that the legacy that they want to leave is intact.
I know when I'm thinking about long-term care planning with clients, particularly if I'm dealing with a couple, he may look at the risk and think, oh, it's not going to happen to me, so I don't really want to talk about this.
Right.
Whereas she is not as risk-oriented, is more thinking about what the consequences might be to her and to the family.
Yeah, I think that's very true. There are a lot of financial risks that we face. And I think women, again, generalizing, but they are perhaps more willing to take a look at it and acknowledge that it is a real possibility. And like you said, see the actual consequences. And for most of my clients, it's not about the money. They don't want to die leaving millions and millions of dollars. It's about what the money does for them. So seeing the resources as a way to give themselves opportunity, choice, a lot of it is about, when you're faced with a situation, being able to have choices and not being stuck.
Well, I know when you're thinking about things like retirement income planning, looking at money that way probably makes it a little bit easier, because you're not just looking about how much have I accumulated, but you're looking at what will it do for me.
Exactly. Yes, it's all about what the money can do. Money is just a tool, right? Money on its own is a neutral force. It's about what we do with it and what it makes possible for us.
So women that you work with, do they tend to be more conservative with their ideas about how they want to manage their money?
No, I believe that's a myth. Maybe there was old stale research out there that women invest more conservatively than men. I feel like the thing is that they're more risk aware and they want to be more educated about it. And then once they feel comfortable with the possibilities, they're fine. I don't see them taking more conservative routes, but they want to know. They want to understand. And that aligns with my approach very well. Every financial decision has trade-offs. There's always going to be a pro and a con. So if we go in eyes wide open and really understand what could happen, then we make better decisions.
Good. Well, let's talk more about that after we take a commercial break for a word from our sponsor. I'm Bill Borton, your host for Live Better Longer.
In nearby Morristown, New Jersey. Bring your appetite and feed your passion.
Welcome back to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton, here with my guest this week, Stephanie McCullough of Sofia Financial. So Stephanie, what can women do right now to improve their situation money-wise?
I think the best first step is to really take a look at the numbers. It's often an intimidating feeling, and women don't feel comfortable because they're worried about what they're going to see. But I want to tell you that the numbers on the page aren't judging you. They're just numbers. They're very neutral. The judgment is all coming from what we're telling ourselves in our heads. So if you can put that aside, turn that off for a minute, and just take a look at the numbers. Very often when I sit down with a client, we'll look at the very basics of what she has saved. Maybe there's a pension, what they have from Social Security, and I can just see them relax and think, oh, I'm not going to be eating cat food. There's a little bit there. It's going to be okay. And then once you're there, then you can move forward.
So there's a whole variety of different financial planners and wealth managers and financial advisors and every other way of describing people that do what you do. So what sets you apart? How do you work with your clients?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like there's a lot of confusion in the public about these different types of financial advisors and planners and the like. What I've tried to create is really an organization where we create a safe space for having that very intimate conversation about your money and your life and how they interact. A judgment-free zone. There is no judgment. Likewise, every woman is unique, so there's no cookie-cutter solutions. There's no off-the-shelf advice that everyone gets. as you mentioned in the intro, we offer planning services and investment management, but they don't always have to go together. So it's very important to know that if there are no monies to be invested, or if the investments are somewhere else and they're not going to move, we can still do the strategic thinking and the planning and coming up with a roadmap. And then as a last point, I would say on the planning and the investment management, we operate as a fiduciary, which means legally we're on the hook if we give bad advice. There are different legal standards that advisors are held to.
Sure.
We feel that's
I
important.
understand. We've talked about that on the show with other guests before. The suitability standard, which registered reps that are affiliated with broker-dealers, which probably are more plentiful
Yep.
than registered investment advisors, and then, of course, the fiduciary standard
Yep.
that firms like you are required to adhere to. And as I've mentioned many times before, I love collaborating with fee-only registered investment advisors because they are fiduciaries, and they're not selling a particular product to their clients. They are truly working for the client.
Right, right.
So when someone first comes to you, what's the process look like? I know you've talked about the conversation, but how does someone take that first step, and what is it like when they sit down with you?
Yeah. So we've come up with a proprietary process that's got 3 main pieces. The first being exploration, then design, and implementation. At the first meeting, you just bring yourself. There's no homework. There's no giant questionnaire to be filled out. And really, you'll be doing most of the talking at that first meeting. I'll be asking lots of questions. And the goal is really to get clear on what is most important to you, what you're trying to create in your life, what makes you happy, what makes you worried. After that, we dig into a little bit about your relationship with money, what your history has been with spending and earning and saving and investing and giving. We're looking for patterns to try to figure out what strategies will work best for you in particular. And then we finally look at the numbers. What do you own? What do you owe? And as I said, judgment-free zone. We bring everything in. A lot of people just bring the papers because they don't always understand what they mean, how they all fit together. We sit down, we sift through it together and bring order to it.
And again, I think as you mentioned before, when they start to realize that it is a judgment-free zone and they don't have to know all the answers,
Right.
they can relax
Yeah.
and just ease into the conversation with you.
Absolutely. The fun part is looking at what's possible. And we can look at different scenarios side by side, different possible future courses of action, and see how that affects things. And, oh, well, what if we tweak this? What if we retire 2 years later? What effect will that have? What if I save a little bit more? What if I save less and go on that big trip to Europe I've been trying to take? What effect does that have? And then you can make informed decisions.
I know with a couple of the clients that we've worked together on, they've been divorcees.
Yes.
And so it seems like the longevity of marriage isn't getting any better than it has in the past. So you have a lot of boomer women that are coming to you that are newly single,
I
either
do.
through widow or divorce?
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard of the phenomenon of the graying of divorce. A lot of people are getting divorced later in life. And often it is a situation, as we said before, where the woman hasn't been in charge of the finances. So on top of the emotional turmoil of a divorce, now you have these financial decisions you have to make. And figuring out how to live on perhaps a lump sum settlement, maybe a few years of alimony, maybe whatever split of the retirement monies you're getting. It's a complicated equation, and yet that part's just numbers. That part we can work out. The emotional piece is a very important part too, and that's what we acknowledge and make space for.
Well, you know, your client now is making her own decisions and her own plans about how to use that money and those resources.
Right.
Interesting. So is there a particular client that you've worked with more recently that comes to mind that you might want to just basically share a few things with us about?
Yeah, one comes to mind. Of course, I'll keep names confidential, but this woman had 2 children, still in school. She had been divorced for a few years. She was a successful professional, and she had taken quite a few steps on her own. She owned her own house. She had improved her credit record, but she felt she'd gone as far as she could on her own. So she came to me, and we really worked initially to get very clear on what was most important to her, what her values were, what she wanted to create for her children, the kind of life she wanted to lead going forward, how long she wanted to work, all of those things. And then we looked at her financial picture, all the different pieces to see where the holes were that we have since filled in. And I'll say it's very gratifying to go and visit her because she feels very confident now. She's aware of where her money's invested. She's content with it. She feels proud of what she's creating for her kids. She's on her path towards a secure retirement.
That must be very satisfying.
It is. That's why the work is so much fun, I think.
We'll
can
talk
have a
more
big
about
impact.
that after another break for another word from our sponsors.
That's less.
Welcome back to Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton, here with this week's guest, Stephanie McCullough from Sofia Financial in Berwyn, Pennsylvania. Stephanie, you're obviously very passionate about what you do. What drives you? How did you get into this?
Well, I really, early on in my career as a financial advisor, worked with a lot of women in the context of a company retirement plan. And I just felt like the women were being left behind. So many of them felt overwhelmed by the whole topic. They had outsourced the functions of looking at the money and the finances and the long-term implications to some man in their life who may or may not have been doing a good job of it. And then I did hear some stories of, people who hadn't asked the right questions. Perhaps they had been sold something that wasn't quite what I would have suggested. And when I asked them, well, what was the story? What was the thinking behind that? They said, I don't know. I didn't ask. So I kind of came up with my philosophy that it's not important. You don't have to know all the answers. You have to know the questions to ask and have the guts to ask them. And really, I feel that is an empowering message because we haven't been taught these things. We don't feel confident around it. But if we know the questions to ask, we can make good decisions.
So I know that you have a second passion now, which is public speaking. And so you combine your two passions, and so that finds you speaking to women's groups about money, right?
It does, yes. I've really come to enjoy this. And if you had told my teenage self that I would love public speaking, I would have thought you were crazy. But I really find that spreading the message of how to make wise decisions, it reaches a broader audience. And that really is my vision, is to hopefully move towards a world where all women are empowered to make wise financial decisions so they can control their future. And it's fun to speak to a room full of women and give them this message, and then you can kind of see most of the shoulders in the room relax. One of the areas I'm really fascinated by is behavioral finance, which is the research about how our brains make decisions under conditions of uncertainty. And there's a lot of research showing that the human brain is not wired to be good at money. We make mistakes on a predictable basis.
Well, we also have our subconscious monkey mind that's going on behind the scenes, which is usually programmed when we're small children around money and what we hear from parents and the like.
Right.
Which usually doesn't help make us a little bit more well-adjusted around money.
It's true that we look at, when I work with my clients, we look at the early money messages people have gotten from their families, and it is interesting to see the lessons that we take from that as adults and how we act.
I haven't heard you speak publicly, but I'm guessing that you end up with a number of women that are lined up waiting to talk to you.
People definitely have questions and want to share their stories. Again, when they feel like it's a safe area to share their stories. I find it very rewarding to help women understand that it's not their fault if they don't feel confident in this area or if they don't feel like they've saved enough. It's okay, and there's things we can do about it.
So how do people get in touch with you? They're through your website?
Yes, my website is sofiafinancial.com. That's SOFIA financial.com.
Okay. And was there a contact form there where they can schedule a meeting with you?
Yes, there is. I offer a free 20-minute consultation, never any obligation. I am not a high-pressure salesperson, so that's not going to be a sales pitch.
I can attest to that.
And that should be right on the website, right on the top of the homepage. It'll say, book your free 20-minute call.
So how did you come up with the name Sofia?
Well, I had a working name for the business, which was the Women's Financial Resource Group, which sounded very kind of plotting and quite masculine.
Almost like a think tank or something.
Right, exactly, which is not what I was going for. So I emailed a group of very close friends, and two separate people came back with the suggestion of Sofia.
Really?
My friend who's half Greek, who said it means wisdom in Greek, and my friend who teaches medieval history, who said it is the ancient incarnation of feminine wisdom.
Wow.
So I said, okay, that's it.
That's pretty deep. So it works for me.
Right, right.
Yeah. So how long have you been running Sofia Financial?
We started in 2011.
Okay.
So we're coming
Which was
into
at a tough time.
We're coming into year 7 now.
Yeah, I started my business in 2011 as
Oh,
well.
what a coincidence.
Yeah. So, yeah, starting a financial services firm on the heels of the meltdown, a little challenging.
Well, because we're not focused exclusively on investment returns and beating the market, but really in having a different conversation about money and aligning your money story with your values and priorities, I didn't find it an obstacle.
So I'm guessing most of your clients come to you from referrals or from your speaking engagements?
Speaking and referrals, yes, I would say so. And I've been active networking in several women's groups in the Philadelphia area, and I've met quite a few people that way as well.
So you are in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, but you certainly are not limited to people out in that part of the country, right?
Correct. We are licensed all over the country and help clients. I have a couple clients I've never met. We do FaceTime and we talk on the phone, and we're perfectly able to help them as well.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah, it's interesting that people can know, like, and trust you enough to work with you when you haven't actually met them in person.
Right, right.
So where do you see things going in the future for Sofia Financial and you? And where do you see the financial world for women changing these days? I know we've had tax reform, which we're just getting into now, but
Right.
are you seeing anything, any trends that people should be aware of or that they want to pay particular attention to?
I think one of the really interesting areas is the increasing interest in impact investing and socially responsible investing. Quite a few of my women clients want to not only have their money grow for them, but also they want to do good in the world while their money is invested. So that's become a focus of ours. How to choose investments to be aware of the societal impact of the companies we're investing in.
Now, working with boomer clients, I know you are necessarily having to bridge the accumulation phase of your clients' financial lives to the income or distribution or what's called decumulation phase.
Right.
And that's pretty challenging.
It is. And really the difference is, accumulation is when you're working or you're building up assets. And then the distribution phase, we use the industry lingo, it really is, okay, now most of your income is not going to be coming from your job. You have to make your income come from your assets. And how does that work? And it is a very complex equation. There's so many unknowns. How long are we going to live? That's the biggest unknown. How are prices and inflation going to behave? What are our needs going to be? Are we going to need long-term care? Are we going to need support in other way? So it is complex, and yet a lot of the math we can do. We have computers to do the math. It's having the conversation, getting things lined up so people feel comfortable that they're making a good decision.
Well, something tells me that more and more boomer women will be looking for you in the future, and I know that you serve them well. I want to thank you, Stephanie, for coming on the show. I've enjoyed myself, and I hope you have as well.
I have. Thanks, Bill.
Great, thank you. Folks, join me again next Tuesday here at RVN TV at 11 a.m. for another episode of Live Better Longer. I'm your host, Bill Borton. Thanks again to my guest this week, Stephanie McCullough.